Thanks for tuning in to the Football Talk Squadron. I'm Dutch.
I'm Maul.
And I'm Pops.
And this is our week 5 of our NFL episodes. So we had some pretty good games. Monday night ended about like we thought. One game that was pretty good and the other that was just depressing to watch for the Titans and the Dolphins. That being said, I did see a pretty good stat. And I was going to see if you guys could guess. So the tales of two coaches. So this is, I want to see if you can guess who these coaches are as I pull this up.
Doug Peterson and Bill Belichick.
Matt Nagy.
All right, so one of these coaches is coached for 15 seasons, the other 16. The first has a record of 152 wins and 89 losses. The other has a win-loss record of 155 losses or wins and 97 losses. One has 9 playoff seasons and 1 Super Bowl. The other has 11 playoff seasons and 1 Super Bowl. One is sort of regarded as this, like, you know, great coach, and the other we like to make fun of. Who are they?
Well,
both are active coaches right now.
I'd assume with 1 Super Bowl, one is going to be Doug Peterson.
It's not Doug Peterson.
Wow. I was going to say Harbaugh.
No. Both are sort of in the dumps right now in terms of, especially recently, they are on new teams compared to what they were.
Give me a division.
One's the NFC East, and the other is the AFC West, currently.
McCarthy.
Yep, that's one.
And the other one's in the West, you said?
AFC West.
Not Harbaugh. It's not Antonio because he's new. Not Andy. Shoot, what's the other team?
Sean Payton.
Sean Payton.
There we go. Yeah.
So Sean Payton's got the 9 playoff seasons, 1 Super Bowl win. He's only 9-8 in those. McCarthy has 11 playoff season. He's 1 game over 500 as well. But he's got 3 more wins than Payton. I saw that on a clip the other day, and I was like, you know, it's funny how we compare these two guys. I think we've gotten a lot more vocal about our sort of Peyton really succeeded because of Drew Brees, and he hasn't succeeded since then, even though they just beat the Jets. And McCarthy and the Cowboys, it's just a matter of time before they suck again.
Yeah, it's weird how the perceptions get, like, we kind of always thought McCarthy only had success because of Rodgers, but we didn't assume that with Peyton and Brees, which, like you said, it's kind of coming to fruition now that maybe most of Peyton's success was because of Brees, but he didn't have that perception, coming into. We thought he was going to be good enough to turn the Broncos around, whereas if it was McCarthy, we would have just been like, oh man, the Broncos are really in trouble now.
Well, and that's the added piece too, is that you look at those years where Aaron Rodgers was in his prime. Like, don't get me wrong, he can still play today, but he's not playing at the level that he was, with McCarthy and the Packers. And I mean, that's ultimately the reason why McCarthy got fired, is he wasted Aaron Rodgers in his prime with a fantastic defense with A.J. Hawk and Clay Matthews and all those dudes. And, they could only turn up 1 Super Bowl.
Do you think he wasted it? Or do you think, like, the difficult part is you don't know whether a GM was the guy making those draft decisions that never gave Rodgers pieces?
Yeah, I definitely think there's argument for that, I believe, later in the career, but I mean, he always had. I mean, look at Jordy Nelson. Like, that was his guy before Devontae. Like, he's always had somebody there with him, and it only really became an issue, these last couple of years when he's finally like, all right, I'm done. You drafted my backup, my replacement, instead of getting me more pieces.
But even like Jordy Nelson and even Devontae, like, all those guys came in later rounds. Like James Jones, Greg Jennings, Donald Driver, like. The vast majority of all the players that he's played with, Rodgers at Green Bay, were late round draft picks, which the big news right now, I'm not sure if you guys saw, they just put it out.
Yeah, Devontae wants out.
Yep, and his top 2 destinations are the Jets and the Saints.
Yep.
He wants to go play for the quarterbacks that he knows. I would argue the Jets need him way worse.
Oh, 100%.
it'll be interesting to see are the Jets willing to pay that price, because I think that right now the Jets are,
Dude, let's talk about that though. Aren't the Raiders only asking for a second rounder?
Yeah,
bro. I would give a first rounder, especially. All right, maybe it would depend on the team, but like I've heard the Chiefs getting thrown out there, and if you think about it, like from the Chiefs' standpoint, you're trying to three-peat, right? That's absolutely a weapon you can use, especially since Rashee Rice just went down. And when you compare the two, go, all right, if I had to give up my first round pick next year as the Chiefs, we're talking what? The 30th, 29th, 28th type pick, right? Because, I mean, what'd they get in the first round this year? Xavier Worthy. Don't get me wrong, he's good, but would you trade Xavier Worthy for Devontae Adams? Absolutely. I would.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah. Sorry.
You know what I mean? Like a future Xavier Worthy, because you don't know what that pick's going to be at the end of the first round. You know what I mean? Like if that's your ticket to three-peat, or even if it's not a first round, like the Saints or the Jets, dude, I'm giving up a second and a third if I needed to for Devontae. So the fact that they're only asking for a second, I mean, I guess it just goes to show you like why the Raiders have been so bad. It's like they don't know the value of their own people.
If he goes to the Chiefs, I'll be shell-shocked just because they trade it to an in-division rival.
Yeah.
The only way I see that happening is exactly sort of the scenario that you're saying, that the Jets and the Saints are like, oh, we'll give you the second round, and the Chiefs are like, we'll give you a first. Like, then I can see them pulling the trigger to their demise. You know, Devontae with Mahomes, like that's the type of combination that I think everyone sort of wanted for years with like Rodgers. Like if they could have went out and got like a Larry Fitzgerald or somebody else, like what that combination would have been like, who knows? But the NFL wants to watch them three-peat. Let them get Devontae Adams, because that would be scary.
And that was something that I saw, out of the Bears circles, was like, what if we gave away Keenan Allen, to the Chiefs, and we got one of their guards, to try to come in and fix that offensive line. I saw a little bit of speculation around that, like hypothetical.
NFL sounds like my fantasy season right now. Everybody's just full panic mode trying to trade and make their team better.
Did you guys see like the worst score this past week was like 10 in fantasy?
Oof.
I mean, this dude just had nothing but busters. I mean, where's Mark Andrews been at? Like, nowhere.
Oh, I saw a stat that it was Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, and there's 3 other players this season that have not caught a touchdown pass, but Jared Goff caught a touchdown pass before all those guys. Like, it's definitely a weird year in fantasy.
It's just been a weird year in the NFL,
yet.
dude. The NFL has just been drunk all season as far as like, there's just backwards things happening left and right.
Yeah, who thought the Vikings were going to be this good?
Not me. I had them dead last in the division. We'll get to that in the midseason feedback. It's ugly. All right, well, starting off Thursday night, Bucks, Falcons. Right now, Atlanta's -1.5. Total for the game's 43.5. A little surprised after the Bucks lose to Denver. I think we're starting to really see that Denver's defense is pretty good. Not to take anything away from Denver's win over the Jets, but I think we're starting to put all the pieces together that the Jets defense is not really good. Buccaneers throttle the Eagles, which Eagles were a favorite even in Tampa, and Tampa just absolutely let them up. Baker had a really good game. You got the Falcons, on the other hand, that beat the Saints, give them their second straight loss. What are your guys' initial thoughts on the game?
The Falcons, to me, are like quintessential Kirk Cousins when he was on the Vikings. Like, there's all these really close games. No one really thinks they're going to be dominant, and I think that somehow they're just finding ways to win. You remember that year, a couple years ago with Kirk, where they were like, they went like 12-0 or 11-0 or something like that in one-score games. Like, every game is close, and that, I don't know if it's Kirk or it's just a coincidence, but that's how the Falcons feel to me right now. Like, their defense, I think, is sneaky good, like, or maybe not as bad as people thought. And then as a team, I don't feel like I'm not watching them getting like any happiness going like, oh, this team is good. Like, they're just kind of meh, but somehow they're winning games. So I'm not surprised by the line just because the Bucks. I am a little surprised by the line because usually the line is an overreaction from last week, which, like you said, the Bucks throttled the Eagles. So I'm surprised. I think they're just giving the Falcons the edge because they're at home. The Bucks have been slightly inconsistent, and again, I think it's just one of those like, dude, the Falcons keep winning games. So if they think this is gonna be a close game, the edge is to the Falcons because they're the ones that keep coming out in these close games. Personally, I think the Bucks are a better team, though.
Yeah, I mean, my piece, the Bucks beat. Now, to be fair, it was his first game in the league, but they beat the Commanders. Right out the gates. Jaden Daniels, started to look like he was trying to get the pieces together that game, and we've seen how Jaden's looked the last couple of weeks. And then the Bucks also beat the Lions. Like, here we are calling the Lions, one of the the contenders this season, and the Buccaneers beat them yet again. I think that we still have the same team that we did last year. Baker's still playing really good football. And I think we hold true to, the Broncos just have that good defense. I think overall, this is where it came down to. We talked about it in the preseason was, hey, we didn't think the Saints were going to be here, but this is the matchup that we, at least I predicted was going to be all season was between the Bucs and the Falcons. Would Kirk revitalize this Falcons team that just needed a quarterback, versus Baker running it back? And we're going to get a taste of that this weekend. I personally think the Buccaneers are playing better football and will end up winning this game, but who knows? Maybe Kirk has, 300-yard game.
Find out. Then Sunday, we get the first London game. We get the Jets versus the undefeated Vikings. Right now, Minnesota's -2.5. Total for the game's 40.5. For me, it's sort of the tale of two defenses. The Vikings have been playing absolutely lights out. For me, it's one of these ones. Maul was talking about it last week, which I think it's a really good point, especially when you're looking at teams that are 4-0 or vice versa, 0-4. It's like, what's the real tell of the tape? I would argue the Vikings are as real as their record because of their defense. Offensively, like, they still have JJ. When Addison comes back and when they get Hawk back, that offense should get even better. Yes, they almost blew that game to Green Bay late after getting up. They looked sort of like Bama against Georgia, got up really quick early, and then just sort of kept Green Bay at bay until the end, and an onside kept them from really winning that game. And then the opposite side's the Jets, which I feel like is a few weeks away from firing Matt Saleh because they look completely dysfunctional right now for a team that's really sort of been together for 2 years. What are your guys' thoughts?
Aren't these games typically decided by who shows up to who goes across the pond first?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the Jets haven't looked like we expected them on either side of the ball. Rodgers has good throws and is playing well. I feel like they haven't been able to run the ball very well, especially against a good defense. And that was highlighted last week against the Broncos, and I think the Vikings defense is just as good. So you're going to get some good plays out of the Jets here and there, but I think the problem is they just can't string together like a full game. And again, the Vikings are just too solid on both sides of the ball right now for the Jets to really get anything going. The best shot that they have is that the Vikings are more jet lagged than they are. That's no pun intended, but that's their best hope.
Yeah, and I think the Jets have a little bit. Obviously, take the quarterback comparison out of it, but if you look at their skills players, you've got Wilson, you got Lazard, you got Mike Wills, and you got Brees in the backfield. Like, you look at that offense, you're like, why are they not able to put up these, outstanding, NFL record-breaking type numbers, last year Miami Dolphins type offense numbers with Aaron Rodgers at the helm? And I think it goes back to the offensive line. And we just saw, Brees Hall got stuffed last week, did absolutely nothing. And that's the thing. You can't get that run game going. It's just like the Bears' first couple of struggles in these early games, against the Texans and whatnot. Like, if you can't get that run game going, it's not going to help your passing game at all because you're just not going to have the balance. And then, when you're having to pass from behind, I mean, you can look at Rodgers' stats last couple, like last week he was, right at 50%, I think, for 200 yards. Like, it's just not going to be productive. And same thing with that defense. Like, we've been talking about, how good that defense had been because of Robert Saleh and his ability to coach a defense. And man, they're looking lost out there this year.
Not to give the Jets like a bunch of excuses, but the weather was horrendous that game. So it was just sloppy on both sides of the ball. And there's always the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, but like, I don't know if you guys watched the game. Like, the Jets should have won, and not saying like they should have won because like they are a better team. They are a better team, but like they were in position. Like, they had a 50-yard field goal to win the game. Like, 9 times out of 10 that gets hit, you know what I mean? And the Jets win, and we're not sitting here going like, man, the Jets suck. Like, it looks bad because they lost to the Broncos, but like they should have won the game. So they're not like going to be a pushover for the Vikings, but there's definitely, something wrong there on both sides of the.
You were talking about it, Pops. I think it's an undervalued position in the NFL, especially when you have young QBs, which leads us in the next game in the battle of the trenches. You got the Panthers and the Bears, both of which I think I heard Greeny talk about this with Caleb Williams, and I sent you guys the link on ESPN where he's like, Eberflus is coaching for his job right now rather than helping Caleb develop, which so much of this, it goes back to that conversation we had before the draft of like, well, what should the Bears do? Should they draft a QB or should they trade back and get some offensive linemen? Should they stack it up? The trenches win games. Why? It's funny that when you were talking about offensive line with a trade for Kansas City, it's like, we need a guard. And I hate saying it, but it's like, you're never going to get that guard. Why?
Exactly.
Because Kansas City knows that that's what makes Mahomes better. Like, when that line's not good at Kansas City, he struggles. Like, I remember Dak, I think it was his either freshman or sophomore season with Dallas when they were just steamrolling people, and then they went to Atlanta and they looked awful. And Dak got sacked like 8 times, and they were like, what's wrong with Dak? And I was like, whoa, did we just skip over the fact that my man was sacked 8 times and like one dude had 4 sacks? Like, that was the problem. It's not the sexy draft pick. Like, the Chargers drafting Joe Alt was not the sexy draft pick, but he'll make that team better. Yeah, he wasn't in for the game. He was hurt. But it's like, when that dude's on the field, he makes a difference for that team. And the Bears and the Panthers, that's what I look at. It's like, it's really whose offensive line is going to play better. Based upon last week, I'd say the Bears. The Bears have started to improve, especially with the rushing attack. DeAndre Swift has a good 36-yard run for 6 that I know Pops was losing his mind for. Because it was surprising. I didn't see the Bears winning. I think we all picked the Rams to win that game. But just like I'll throw, praise on the Vikings, Bears defense is good. Like, they are consistently winning games for the Bears. I can't say the same about the Panthers. I know we had the Red Rocket come out and get them a win against the Raiders, and they put up more points than Bryce Young would have against Cincinnati. But this is a good, I think, warm-up game for the Bears to really flex and get Caleb some good reps. What do y'all think?
I think, for me, I'll tell you real quick, if you don't mind, Maul, just the piece that you brought up with Greeny, and I kind of talked about it in text message last night. For me, it's Eberflus year 1, he won 3 games. Eberflus year 2, he won 7, and he lost 3 by 1 possession. This year, the 2 games we lost have been by 1 possession. So for me, I see the improvement, and most of it's been on the defensive side of the ball. But he's trying to help the offense as well. Like, we had XII last year. Now XI's in Las Vegas. We brought in Shane Waldron, trying to see what he can do. And I don't necessarily agree with where Greeny's going. I know he's a Chicago guy, or he went to school in Chicago, so he's got a little bit of ties to the city. But I just didn't fully agree with what he was saying, because I think Eberflus is moving the franchise in the right direction. And it's one of those things that takes time. Like, he was given franchise I was ran into the ground by Ryan Pace, and some of Matt Nagy's coaching. And Poles and Eberflus in the last 3 seasons have had to completely turn this around. So it's too early for me to say that this is 100% Eberflus's fault for not helping the offense or helping player development. I know that it falls back on him, but you know, go look. Poles brought in offensive line this offseason. Like, he's trying to make those changes. Now, for the game itself, dude, I tell you what, I think this is the game that we see Caleb Williams put up a game like Jaden Daniels. Like, I think it'll be a neck and neck competition as far as stats go between the two rookies, and I think Caleb's going to go off. He had a pretty good game last week, mostly because he was able to dump it off to DeAndre Swift, and he just ran like crazy. But I think this week we'll also be able to see Caleb use a little bit more of that arm talent and win us, throw 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add there, other than kind of like what you talked about, Dutch. Like, this is going to come down to, I don't know if it's Eberflus. Like you said, ultimately it comes down to Eberflus, but I don't know if it's the quarterback's coach or who's calling plays. Like, somebody needs to coach Caleb Williams and telling him that, like, he doesn't need to play like he played at USC. Like, he does not need to do that. So it's kind of one and the same. Like, yes, they need to develop Caleb Williams, but I agree with you, Pops. I also don't think Eberflus is coaching for his job, but like, developing Caleb Williams will win you your games and then also keep you your job. So
yeah,
even though the Panthers have significantly improved since they got, they benched Bryce Young, since Andy Dalton came in, that hasn't necessarily made their defense any better, right? It's still the Panthers. They're still not a great team. So the Bears need to come up with some scheme specifically for this game so that Caleb Williams can have that big game, and they should be able to handle the Panthers.
Talk about this and get your guys' feedback before we move to the next game. The next game's the Ravens and the Bengals. But since it is the Ravens, I do want to talk about this. I think with the Eberflus situation, like, if you look at Baltimore and you look at Pittsburgh, I feel like those scenarios are far more conducive to producing a team that, like, the Bears want to be, because the coaches know that they're given slack. It's like, hey, we want you to develop. And if that means that we don't win this year, by all means, that's what happens. But it's like, they know that their job's not always at risk. Like, I can't imagine what it's like being Canellis at Carolina right now. Like, you're just under the gun. It's like he's fired multiple coaches after 1 year. You feel this overwhelming need to, like, get the horse running or you're going to be gone. But you look at Pittsburgh and Baltimore, and it's like they went out. You had a Super Bowl winning quarterback in Joe Flacco that they said, hey, like, we're going to go get Deshaun Watson or Lamar Jackson, and we're going to find out what happens. And it's worked out. But and I think that works because you have ownership in a team that's willing to let, like, the coaches run, and you give them slack, and you're like, hey, I'm putting a lot of faith in you. I'm not hiring you for 5 years. Like, I'm really hiring you until you're sort of done coaching. Like, Steelers have only had 3 head coaches since they were the Steel Curtain. I look at the Bears, and it's a very similar situation. Like, they had a great coach in Lovie Smith. Yeah, and they got fed up with him. And the second that they got fed up with him, what happened? They started going right back into the same scenario that they're in, that it's just like, well, Nagy didn't get us there. Fire it. All right, John Fox. Let's go, Nagy. We just keep going through guys. And it's one of these ones that part of it's the ownership of not letting Eberflus just say, hey, develop this guy. And we know that down the road, that's going to pay us more benefits.
Yeah, as much as fans, it's easy to just kind of go, like, the guys on the field are what win and lose games. There's a reason why certain organizations don't have success, continually. And I think that gets lost a lot of the times, is like, sometimes it just doesn't even matter who you have on the field. As an organization, you're bound to ultimately fail based on decisions that are made, kind of outside the game.
And that takes us into the Ravens and Bengals. Baltimore's -2.5. This is sort of what Maul talked about a few weeks ago, that were the Bengals representative of 0-3? No, I still think the Bengals have problems. You get the Ravens sitting at 2-2. They come out of just absolutely throttling the Bills, which, not to throw shade at the Bills, that was the defense that I thought we were going to see, and the offense that we were going to like. That's who I thought the Bills were. And when me and Maul did the NFL episode last week, this was the thing that my buddy who's a Bills fan said. He's like, we beat the bad teams. Now can we play the good teams and compete? And the answer yet again this year was no.
Yeah.
And that was surprising to me. Well, more just heartbreaking for the Bills, but now we got the Ravens and Bengals.
Not to like give the Bills any credit, because they did get handled, and like that's going to end up being, you know, the Bills' downfall, because it seems like that's every year is like why they can't get over that hump. I just want to say, like, I'll be the first to admit that I was wrong about like Derrick Henry being in Baltimore. The Baltimore staff has adjusted their play calling and the way that they're running plays to make Derrick Henry the absolute monster that we all know he is, right? Like, we were expecting, and I think a lot of people were thinking like, oh, you know, we're going to run this like read option, and now you got to try to guard Derrick and Lamar. And I think we thought, or at least I thought, that's not a good fit for Derrick Henry. Like, he's not a read option type of guy. Yes, when you say the name, like, I got to guard Lamar or Derrick Henry, that sounds scary, but we didn't think that was going to be a good fit, because that's the kind of offense that Baltimore ran. They've changed their offense. Like, I mean, and again, they did that against the Bills, and you see how effective that was with Derrick Henry. So again, not to like give the Bills a pass, but like, I don't know who's stopping that, right? Like, if Baltimore shows up and does that, they're going to do that to any team in the league. There is not one team in the league that could stop that. So, you know, the Bengals definitely aren't one of them. So, you know, as long Baltimore's biggest problem is keeping their foot on the gas. I think this was the first game we saw against the Bills that like they get up and then stay up, because they've done this every single week, but then let the other team kind of work their way back in. So, you know, Baltimore, for all intents and purposes, should be undefeated.
Well, and Lamar was actually under center, you know, handing the ball off, you know, allowing for Derrick Henry to run downhill versus running the read option, trying to get him going. And, I mean, I text you guys from the get-go. As soon as they snapped that first play that he ran for 87, that safety, that DB, he made a business decision. You can go back and watch tape. He had plenty of time to fill the gap. He went the other way because he was not about to get ran over at Derrick Henry running full speed.
I got kids watching. You're going to make me look like a fool.
He had seen enough of them Josh Norman highlights getting tossed.
Bounced.
It's like, dude, I ain't being on no Nike poster. You can forget this.
It'll make me a meme.
It's funny that you talk about that, Maul, because that was the thing I noticed in that game. Was it's not the zone read, it was like Pops was saying, out of the eye, and then he had a fullback in Picard blocking for him, and I was just sitting there and I'm like, dude, this was Alabama, and this is why he dominated there and won the Heisman. It's like, if you commit to running the football and you allow him, because he's not a terribly agile running, he seems to go down really easy,
for as big as he is.
But dude, once he, like, people make business decisions when he gets through that second level. Guys will try to chase him down and tackle him around his ankles, but I have yet to see a DB square him up in the hole. Because that's, like you said, dude, that's F equals MA, baby. Like, that was a high school physics lesson. You're going to lose that. Derrick Henry's 250 pounds. Like, this DB weighing $180. I'm sorry, dog. You better be running really fast to go in there to counter that. But I ain't seen anybody do that. So I'm with you, Maul. Like, this should be the Ravens by a mile.
Identity.
It should be their identity. And if you really want to get cute with it, you just fake it off of the power. Like, you act like you're running and you take Lamar off the side when everyone's crashing. That's when you burn them for like 40 yards for no good reason, because they're just committing to this run. And now it's like, oh yeah, and we had Zay trail the play on the backside and we hit it for 6. That's how you win games.
So, and we've talked about this too, and I've seen this happen. Now, you'd hope the Ravens coaching staff is better than this, and it feels like at this point that they are. But how many times have we seen teams have success like this? And especially with the Ravens, because it's like Lamar's the reigning MVP. We got to get him his stats. Like they're going to go away from this because they're going to start trying to get cute with it as opposed to just do what's working. And we've seen this like with the Eagles, we've seen it with multiple different teams where instead of just, dude, I don't care if you just run, 22 dive 45 times in a game. Like if it's working, just keep doing it. But you see these teams go, oh, well, Lamar's reigning MVP. We got to get him some touchdowns. Or like, hey, Zay's getting mad because he's not touching the ball. Dude, I don't care. If you can put up 45 points on a game and control the clock because you got an absolute freight train running downhill, just do it, right? So like, I wouldn't put it past the NFL to get in their own way and try to get cute with it and then start screwing things up. And, there's going to be that game where they do that and everybody's going to look back and just go, why aren't we running the ball?
Yeah. I don't have anything else on that.
Mm-mm.
Next game, and Dolphins Patriots, and I'll ask you guys a question, and we'll see what your guys' response is. Did McDaniels save Tua, or did Tua save McDaniel?
Whoa.
Because without Tua,
this offense is terrible.
Dude, they're awful. Awful.
I'll follow up with a question. Is Tua really saved?
You're not wrong. I mean, it's becoming more and more apparent that I really think McDaniels is the problem in Miami. Because even with Tua in the game, like I go back last year when Tua was healthy, they lose the division after having a lead. They go into Kansas City and get smacked. And now you sit back and you look at a team without Tua, and it's like, dude, the offense is completely lost. Like, which I get.
I don't think McDaniels is the problem. However, because I do think he's a good coach, I think this is just where it's like it's hard to find a good coach. It's nearly impossible to find a great coach. We haven't seen a whole lot of great coaches recently. My comparison would be like Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur had Jordan Love go out, and he was presented with Malik Willis. And what did they do? They went 2-0 with Malik Willis at the helm. And the reason why is because he made adjustments and came up with a game plan to fit the guys that were on the field. And again, I think McDaniels is a fine coach. He's okay. But this is where he will never go beyond just being an okay, good coach. The plays and the system that he put in place were fine for the people on the field. But anytime it goes against him, aka the champion or the AFC playoff game against the Chiefs, or now Tua going out, he doesn't know how to make adjustments. He can't get out of that scheme. He just keeps running the same scheme. And if it's either not working or you don't have the players to run that scheme, they look awful. I mean, they're atrocious. And again, like that's where McDaniels as a coach needs to develop. And I don't think he's necessarily the problem because it's like you have plenty of worse options out there. However, if he doesn't start making adjustments, Miami will never get over that hump.
Yeah, and I mean, you think he would have taken in a little bit of adjustments after they got boat raced in -40 weather in KC last year. Like that was the thing. The Chiefs were able to make adjustments, and the Dolphins just looked absolutely lost on offense. And that's one of those games where the elite coaches like Maul's talking about, like you sit there and you're like, where did I screw up as a coach? And I think this is where when we get to the point like talking about Dan Campbell, like I think this is where Dan Campbell is still being able to develop as a coach, as a young coach, and get all this experience. And he's making the adjustments. He's seeing where he makes the wrong mistakes and swapping that, trying to change it, his coaching style overall. And we're just not seeing that. And honestly, like, I think McDaniels, from the looks of it, might be a little loose with the discipline with the stars. Because, I mean, Tyreek screaming at everybody was not a good look on the sidelines either.
And then on the opposite side, you got the Pats. This is sort of, I know me and Maul talked about it with the Survivor poll. Like, if you're going to pick the Patriots to win a game for the rest of the season, this is it.
Yeah, I agree.
Because Huntley, it was weird. The thing that killed the Dolphins was when Will Levis got hurt. Like, the second Mason Rudolph came into that game, it was like you could tell the Dolphins sideline was like, oh, our best player just left the field. He doesn't even play for us. Like, the Patriots should win this game. the Patriots defense isn't bad. Yeah, they got absolutely just manhandled against San Francisco, which I think everyone saw, even Vegas saw. That was the highest spread for last week. This should be the Patriots game.
Agreed.
Until Tua comes back. And I think that you asked the right question, Maul, which is, even when Tua comes back, is he really saved? No. This team has a lot of problems. They can't make adjustments. When you saw it in the Miami game or the Buffalo game. They got down Miami has a good offense. They can do stuff, but it's sort of like hitting, hey, the bomb worked once on NFL Blitz. Let me call it for the next 13 plays in a row. And you're sitting back, you're like, why is it not working? It's like, yeah, because that's life, dog. You got to change it up every once in a while. So
yeah, I think the key for the Patriots is they just got to stop turning the ball over. I think Ramondre's had a fumble in every single game. And again, that's not to say that they should be winning games, because they're still not a great football team. But I don't think they're quite as bad as we originally thought they were going to be. They're still not good, but if they can just hold on to the ball again, this should be the game that I don't see the Dolphins scoring very, very many points. So if they can just hold on to the ball, control the clock, and just show up, they should win.
You can't tell me that Bill Belichick wouldn't have taped that ball to that man's hands.
He would have just sat him on the bench. He would have put Ramondre on the bench and had the backup come in.
Yeah. Next game, Pops, you talked about it, had a off start to week 1, but since then, probably the best offense in the NFL, in my opinion. You got the Commanders against the Browns. Thoughts?
Yeah, Jay Daniels, what he's able to do, I would even take a step further. Just look at Cliff Kingsbury. I think this is a awesome redemption story for Cliff. He had some success. Obviously, went down, helped out Caleb at USC after he got fired from the Cardinals, and then he's able to go and just put up 42 on the Cardinals this past weekend. And I think what we're seeing is the combo that you need as coaching. Dan Quinn calls a fantastic defense, and it's working for him with the guys that he's had. Washington's always had a team with a decent defense. It's always just been the struggle of who is leading the offense. And it seems like they've got a guy now, and Cliff Kingsbury is able to just worry about the offense versus the whole entire organization. And it seems to be working out for now. I personally think Jaden Daniels is the top rookie right now. I told you guys, unless Malik Neighbors started playing quarterback, I think this is Jaden's award to lose in this season. For the Browns, dude, the defense is always on the field, so we're not seeing the defense that we know that's so dominant, with Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett is still wreaking havoc, but he's also done by the third quarter because he's been on the field for 3/4 of the game already, and it's just the offense is not working. They do have Chubb back at practice, so we'll see if they can eventually add Chubb back into the rotation. But I think the Commanders are going to continue rolling. They're at home, and it's going to be another win for Washington.
Yeah, my only thought is that I'm mad that I already picked Washington in my survivor pool.
I see that. Next game, we got the Colts against the Jags. Jags are actually -3 this game for Vegas' spread, even though they're 0-4. Jags came out and played really well against Houston last week, which I sit back and I go, it's sort of the second week in a row that Houston really got exposed defensively.
Mm-hmm.
The Colts, however, this is where I sit back and we go back to the Joe Flacco theory, which is having a guy sort of like a Sam Darnold, but I think Joe Flacco far exceeds Sam Darnold, that knows what he's doing. And it's having that seasoned NFL backup veteran is such a danger to have on a team when you have a rookie, because it's one of these ones where I'm like, hey, it would probably benefit Richardson to sit him and let Flacco lead, because
100%.
Flacco's good. And it's but we get into this he's already started, now he's got to play. And it's I think the guy that gives you the best chance to win right now is Joe Flacco.
100%.
Dude, when you talked about Joe Flacco and the Ravens, I was just saving this because, you said it perfectly. a lot of teams, I mean, look at the Dolphins. We just talked about the Dolphins. Tua goes down, and it's like, who's your backup? Skylar Thompson? Like, all right, get out of here, High School Musical. Like, we're done. We're season's over. Richardson goes down. Flacco comes in. It's like, did we just get better? You know, like, having that is just the comfortability of just knowing that this guy could take you to the playoffs. Like, you're probably a better team. I think the thought of Anthony Richardson is more exciting, you know, because he has this like future and he's clearly more athletic than Joe Flacco. But from like who's a better quarterback at this moment, dude, I think it's Flacco, which is, you know, if Vegas is knocking the Colts because he might start instead of, you know, Richardson, dude, hammer that upset all day, because I think this is just another example, though, of how we've talked about the quarterback play has diminished so aggressively. Because I might be alone in this, but like when Flacco was even out there winning a Super Bowl, I was still, and to this day, going like, Flacco's average, dude. He was average at the time he was playing. He was never that like superstar quarterback. And now he's as a backup looking at like top 10 in the league. You know what I mean? Like, and that's just because the other quarterbacks around the league, that play has diminished so aggressively. Like Flacco, you know, and again, I think Flacco's better now than when he was out there winning Super Bowls. And that's wild to think about. But I mean, they got Josh Downs back. Like the Jags, yeah, they put up some points on the Texans, but like you talked about, the Texans D is not that great. Not that the Colts D is really any better, but I mean the Jags are atrocious. Like they are an absolute dumpster fire. So if the Colts show up slow, maybe the Jags can sneak one out here because it's a division game, but there's no way that the Colts shouldn't be at least favored in this game.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at it right now, the injury report for Jacksonville, I mean, they're missing Darnell Savage, so there's your starting safety. You're missing Josh Hines at Allen. There's, you know, the guy who's going to be pressuring, you know, Joe Flacco or AR, whoever's playing the game. You know, so they're already got pieces missing of the defense that they need out there on the field. And I'll tell you what, like, I actually picked up Joe Flacco this week in fantasy because I'm just like, hey, he's about to throttle the Jaguars. And it brings me back to the point of the whole, you know, sophomore slump / this could still be, you know, AR's rookie season because he didn't really play that much last year. One thing's evident. He still has not figured out how to slide yet. Like, you got hurt running the ball again. Like, go down, dude. Like, I understand you're a big guy, but guess what? So is everybody else in this league. You're in the top of the top now. You're not in college. You're not in high school. Just go down because you don't need that extra yard in the middle of the game.
Yeah. This is what happens when guys who were big in college go to the pros and they think they're still in college. It's I don't care who you are. Like Ed Reed may not be the biggest guy that you've played against, but if that dude knows how to do one thing, it's murder you. Like,
He'll take your head off.
Yeah, and he's coming. Like, plain simple. Next up, Bills, Texans. You got the Bills who just came off an absolute beating by the Ravens, going to the Texans, who I would argue are really close to being 1-3. You know, the Bears played them pretty tight. Could have went either way. Then they get throttled by the Vikings, and then last week against the Jags, it was going back and forth. It's a game that I think means a lot more to the Texans than it does the Bills, just because the Texans, I think right now, are viewed as this heavy favorite in the AFC as being the rival to the Chiefs. And I would argue the Texans are starting to show some signs that there's some major flaws right now on them. Thoughts?
I think this is going to be the best game of the weekend. You know, I think it's, as far as potential goes, two of the best teams that, you know, that are matching up. It'll just depend on who shows up on both sides of the ball, because we've seen the ability to get exposed on both sides of the ball for both teams now. So I really I think it's going to be a great game.
Yeah, I mean, I can see this starting to be, you know, kind of like a wild card matchup. You know, I think now we're seeing with Houston being, you know, not as good as what we thought they were. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I think they're going to win the AFC South. But if they don't, because of whatever these flaws are, like we're looking right now, the Bills, you know, they've are probably going to get their division based on how the Jets are playing and Miami. So this is a playoff game that we're getting right after the first quarter of the season, and this will be a true litmus test for both teams. I mean, we'll see how the Bills bounce back after getting absolutely blown out by the Ravens, and then same for the Texans. Texans like, hey, we almost lost to a 0-3 team, for a division rival. Let's see if we get this show back on the road or not.
I think it's going to come down to one of those games. It's like the differentiator is going to be like coaching. I think on both sides of the ball, skill level wise, it's pretty equal. Like they have talent on both sides of the ball, and it's just going to come down to like who comes up with a better scheme to either expose your opponent's weakness or play into your strengths.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to is like, where's like for the Texans, where's Stephon and where's Tank? Like Nico Collins is getting all the love, and I don't know if that's just because he's number 3 and he's the option that's always open, but I mean, they've got other weapons that got to come into this offense because it seems like Nico putting up 100 yards every single game, that the other guys just aren't being utilized, and they're not truly finding a good battle rhythm on offense.
I will give the Texans a little bit of a pass because if we want to talk about undervalued guys, it's showing right now. Joe Mixon's a really good running back.
Oh, yeah.
And him not being starting with the Texans, like Cam Akers, I think we've always known, like, he's good in he's one of those like second
complementary role.
Yeah, like Tony Pollard was to Zeke. Like, it's a great guy to throw in on third down who's fresh.
Madison to Cook. Yeah.
Yeah, like just these guys that they'll show flashes that you're like, ooh, I think that guy should be a starter. And then he gets the starter role and you're like, not the starter. Yeah. So that's when Mixon comes back, I think the Texans will resume that form that they showed in week 1. But until Mixon comes back, not having a running back it's hurting Houston right now. Next up, Raiders Broncos. This is the other like sneaky survivor pool pick that I like in the Broncos. Defense is playing really well. The Raiders, this is one of these ones I'll ask this question to you guys. Is Antonio Pierce, his non-coaching side, showing up? Like, I think he's a great motivator, sort of like Dan Campbell, but Campbell has shown that he's able to put guys into places to get the coaching done, and he's the risk taker. But Pierce, I'm not seeing that level of coaching come out of him that's inspiring guys like he was last season, which I think was the main reason he got hired. I'm starting to see sort of the screws unraveling in Vegas.
Dude, I'm mixed. There's clearly, they're not like a great team. I don't think anybody's going to sit here and tell you that they could be this great team. There's just, I mean, like, Crosby's hurt. Now, they got the win last week, so that's good. Devontae winning out is a distraction and a problem for sure. I don't think that Pierce is necessarily a problem. Again, this is kind of one of those like, do I think that Brock Bowers is a bad draft pick? No. Like, Brock Bowers is phenomenal. He's actually probably their best player on offense right now. But the problem is, did you need another tight end? Like, you didn't. And it's kind of like what you talked about with the Texans. Like, is Nico putting up 100 yards a game sexy? Yeah. But is it winning you football games? Like, not necessarily, right? So, like, they knew coming into the year it was Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell. Like, I don't think they had necessarily, by the time it got to them in the draft, that they were going to pick a quarterback that could have helped them. But, like, there's other quarterbacks out there, right? Like, take this team and put Joe Flacco at the helm. That's a different team. You know what I mean? And, like, because the quarterback position is so impactful, like that's their problem. I don't think it's necessarily Pierce. It's that they don't have the pieces right now, right? So, like, it's hard to really blame the coach when you don't even have the pieces that are conducive for winning. Also, they beat the Ravens and then lost to the Panthers. I mean, like, how, like, you hit both sides of the spectrum there as far as, like, you don't know what team is showing up. So, like, good luck. Your guess is as good as mine. I agree with you, Dutch, and like, this is a sneaky survivor pick with that Broncos, just because their offense is kind of dysfunctional, especially if Adams doesn't play, and the Broncos defense is so good. So, that's my take on it.
Next game up, 49ers Cardinals. Right now, this is the largest spread of the week. got the Niners minus 7.5 against the Cardinals, which is a little surprising just because I feel like the Cardinals have played better than we thought last week. Did they lose to Washington? And I think this is sort of where that overreaction in the line comes from, that, oh, they got trounced by Washington. And I would sit back and go, you look at Washington's offense in terms of the players they have, like Washington has players. Like it, as I laugh because it was such a great clip of me and you being like, what did Scary Terry say? Finally has a guy to throw him the football. Washington's a good team. They have
They're
a
going to
very
win the
good
East,
offense.
dude. The Cowboys and the Eagles are both super dysfunctional, and Washington's going to win the East.
Glad that you said it, because, yeah, mark this tape, October 2nd, 2024. Yeah. And it's true. Like, the Eagles are an absolute mess.
Jalen looks terrible.
Dude, Danny Dimes is done. And it's yet again another player for the Giants that we'll get to it when they play Seattle. Like, without Neighbors, that team is garbage.
Yeah,
Garbage.
Well, I said Jalen. Jalen looks bad.
Oh, I thought you said Daboll. Jalen looks awful. I mean, we'll get to. They're on a bye week. Jalen to this. So bringing back the Bama Georgia game, even though we haven't talked college, me and Maul were talking on the phone during the game, and we said something about like Milroe, like compared to last year to this year. Like this year, what are they doing? They're running him. It's like, hey, I have this tremendous skill set. Let me use it. And guess what? He looks amazing. People are like, oh my gosh. Like, now, typical Mel Kiper, he's like, I think it's compete for the number one quarterback. And I'm like, you are smoking cocaine. Like, Milroe's good, but he's not this like first quarterback off the board good. I sit back and look at the Eagles and I say the same thing. Like, why was Jalen and the Eagles so good during that Super Bowl run? Because they ran him. Like, it added this extra threat. And the offense doesn't have an identity. Honestly, they need to transition to what the Ravens are doing.
I was just going to say that.
Give the ball to Saquon.
Yep.
Give the ball to, like, he touched it twice in the first, like, 4 drives of that game. It's like, why do we pay the dude? This is the same stuff they did last year with Swift and the other running backs. It was like, it took him halfway through the season to be like, Swift's a starter. And you're just like, as a fan, everyone was like, Swift was a starter from week 1. You should have been playing it.
Exactly.
It drives me insane. Absolutely insane.
Back to the Cardinals and Niners, though.
Sorry. Yeah.
Right. No, I know. It was a great rant. It's weird that this is the largest spread. I think that's a little more telling of just like the other games are closer in talent, because I do think this is going to be a good game. I don't think the Cardinals being underdogs by a touchdown is really, I could see it happening because it's the Niners, but the Niners also have had some, ups and downs themselves. The Cardinals have just been too inconsistent to really get a good read on them. You know what I mean? And Kyler played well. They did well. Kyler didn't play so well. They didn't do so well. So I think it's going to be a good game. I don't think the line is a real testament to how the game's going to go. But again, if you're making me pick, the Niners are a better football team and should be able to do whatever they need to do to win the game.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it right now, it's also kind of the same thing as if Kyler's running or not, too, adding that element to the game. Like, I just went back and looked. Last week, Kyler only ran once for 3 yards. So, like, if he's going to drop back and be a pocket passer, I don't have to worry about him running, and now we just got to worry about covering, MHJ. As long as we stop James Conner, like, they've got to pass to win this game. Now, to be fair, they were beating the brakes off of the Bills. The Bills came back and beat them. They boat raced the Rams. It was a 1-score game against the Lions. I still think this team is better than what they're showing, but as far as the 49ers go, it looked like they had a decent tune-up game this past week against the Patriots, and maybe they're going to start getting the ball rolling because, I mean, shoot, Ayuk being week 5 and Ayuk is not looking worth the money it's not a good look for them, and the unfortunate news with CMC, the team obviously has their their own deficits without the offense running through C-Mac.
I think like Deshaun Watson's probably going to take the award for worst quarterback trade in the history of the NFL.
Yeah.
You know, what was that guy's name that played for the Redskins after leaving the Albert Hainsworth will probably go down defensively. This to me is the worst
Wide receiver
re-signing right now, period. They paid him wide receiver one money, and he's yet again another player that does not have a touchdown reception. And not only that, it's not there during games. And
I think it's
I know that this
100
is
yards, like 136 yards, I think.
Yeah, I feel like I'm beating up Maul because this was one of his keepers in fantasy, and it's just like at this point you got to cut him in fantasy, even though he's sitting there as a wide receiver number 2. But Jawan Jennings is outplaying him every single game. It's just
and he's causing issues off the field. I mean, did you guys saw that thing where he showed up to practice in the wrong shorts and was like
in the wrong outfit,
throwing a fit because Shanahan made him go change? Like, dude, if that's not like take your money and run, like I've never seen it. That's just it's just sad because like we always make a joke about it, but it's like he's literally doing that and it's bringing the rest of the team down. And even more so now because they paid him. Now they're not going to be able to pay somebody else. And they have so many stars on that team. Like we already kind of knew going in, there wasn't enough money to go around. And we were kind of thinking it was going to be Purdy that got cut. And now it's going to turn out, shoot, they're probably going to have a little regret there where they go, hey, we could have saved that money, let you walk. And now we could have kept Purdy or something. I don't know. But like
Kittle or
Kittle
Debo.
next year.
Anybody, right? Like anybody. Like because Ayuk is not doing a thing. And for the listeners out there, I did cut Brandon Ayuk in fantasy this week. And you know who I picked up? Dontavian Wicks. Like, if you're going to tell me at the beginning of the season that I was dropping one of my keepers for a third, a wide receiver 3, I'd just been like, oh, so I'm 0-4, right? Yeah, I am 0-4.
I am too.
So if there's passion behind my voice, there's reasons.
I'm upset. Next game, Packers-Rams. Did they bring back Jordan Love too soon?
I don't think so. I mean, he had 4 touchdowns. Like, yeah, he looked like Brett Favre. He also had 3 interceptions, but...
Oh, I thought you were going to say Parkinson's.
Yeah, well, I mean, he looked like he played with some there in the first half. But, I mean, he almost came back and won the game. So, I don't think they brought him back too soon. If it continues to linger, obviously we'll know the question or the answer to that question there. But... I mean, after what the Bears did to the Rams last week, I could see, the Rams falling into a hole where they end up 1-4 going up against the Rams or Packers here.
Another example of the NFL just being drunk, though, as far as like another thing that I didn't have on my bingo card is if at the beginning of the year you told me the Packers are going to be 2-0 with Malik Willis and 0-2 with Jordan Love, like. I mean, like, what's happening right now? Like, what is going on in the NFL? That's wild to me, and it's hard. This is why, like, the season's 18 weeks, just because it's 4 weeks is starting to get into a decent sample size, but it's just, especially with injuries and things like that, it's so hard to have a real read on some of these teams with such a small sample size.
But it goes back to this, like, why is one 2-0 and the other 0-2? My argument is like with Willis, it's like they knew what their identity needed to be, which was to run the football. It was like we're not going to win throwing. We got to establish a run. We're going to use Willis's legs. Like we're going to make this our identity. And it worked like really well. Now I get that they played like the Titans and I forget who else they played. It was
the Titans and the Colts.
So it wasn't the Vikings. But with Love, like that's the thing I see with the offense. It's like then they get into this identity crisis of it's like, well, we have Josh Jacobs. Yeah, but I got Jordan Love and I want him to air it out. And it's like at the same time, Love's still really sort of just a sophomore. Like I get he's set on the bench behind Rodgers, but game action and him being hurt, this was sort of the time, and that's why I asked the question of did they bring him back too soon? It's like if he's not fully mobile, then run the football. Like, know who your guy is. Like, don't put a kid that's coming back off an injury into a bad position. Now, did they almost come back and win? Yes, but this is the NFL. It's really hard to come back when you're down 28 points. Like the fact that they made it a game says a lot.
I also think one of their other losses is to the Eagles that first week, and that Eagles team was like, yeah, we think the Eagles are going to the Super Bowl. If the Packers played the Eagles now, I feel like the Packers win by 40. You know what I mean? So
yes,
it's just a weird, the dynamic right now as far as wins and losses and who those guys are in that column is weird. Because again, the Rams came back and beat the Niners, but then lose to the Bears. Like there's just so many things that are inconsistent right now in the NFL.
That Bears defense is something else. I'll tell you that.
Packers defense is pretty good though. I mean, like they're not bad. So I mean, the Rams are obviously struggling on the offensive side of the ball from they've lost so many players. So it should be the Packers to win.
They're on a bye week this week, but the worst defense in the NFC North is the Lions.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, Terry and Arnold, corner out of Alabama, cannot stop holding guys. My man got flagged a dozen times, and it was so. I hate it when corners look up and they're like, and you're like, we all saw it at home. It was a hold, my man. You tackled him. What are you talking about? The Lions, to me, are that team that I think are overrated right now because, son, your quarterback went 18 for 18 and you still were in a close game against Seattle. That to me is remarkable.
Until the end. Yeah, until the end.
If your quarterback has a perfect passer rating and you're struggling to win, you got some problems you need to fix.
Well, dude, I even give the props though. Looking going into this transition with the Giants and the Seahawks this week. Dude, Geno threw for 395. And then you had Kenneth Walker running for almost 100. They have an offense up there in Seattle. Obviously, they still got DK. They still got Lockett. The pieces are in place for Geno just to be smart with the football and take care of it. And that was his problem. He threw a pick. He also put it down on the turf a couple of times. So that's the issue is going to be for the Seahawks to take care of the ball. But honestly, I see the Seahawks just steamrolling the Giants this weekend.
Yeah, and the Seahawks, I mean, the loss against the Lions, it didn't help when they were driving and DK fumbled.
Yeah.
The Seahawks really punished themselves throughout that game. Every time they had a chance to take the lead or tie it up, they bit themselves in the foot with a turnover. On the opposite side, Giant, between them and Miami, these are the two worst teams.
I just pray that Malik doesn't get hurt. As much as that kid's getting the football, you just hope that he doesn't get hurt.
I mean, has he cleared concussion protocol yet?
Let me take a look since we're asking.
I mean, I haven't heard any news, but I know that was one of the big things, him going out. So he might already be hurt, and that's the problem. And
he's questionable.
Yeah,
he can come back this weekend.
I think it's just going to depend on when he clears, and how comfortable with them putting him back on the field. As far as the Seahawks go, I'll be the first one to admit, I think I said it last week. I thought they were a higher chance of them being pretenders than actual contenders, even though they were undefeated and all that. I just thought who they've played, the way they looked, I wasn't quite sure their record was, representative of how good they were. So I wasn't shocked that the Lions won. That being said, I will give them credit that they played better than I was giving them credit for. So, and as far as Terry and Arnold goes, just to, name 5 cornerbacks in the league that don't just hold on every play. That's just how defenders play nowadays, and it's really sad. I was just having this conversation with my dad or my brother or something of just nobody. There's very, very few corners in the league right now. It's just receivers. We don't get guys that can run routes and actually catch with their hands. We just look at who's the fastest. Yeah, give me that guy. Same thing with defenders. It's just that's how they play defense. The ball snapped and they grab them. And then again, they turn around and go, what do you mean I held? It's bro, I thought you were playing offensive line for a second there. That's how we defend people nowadays.
Well, we talked about it, me and you on the phone. Coaching for cornerbacks sucks in college because all it is guys who can't catch just line up and just, stay as close as humanly possible. But when's the last time in college you saw a corner turn his head, to find the football. It's like we don't teach guys that. Instead, we teach them that when the wide receiver's hands go up, that's when you put your hand in the middle and you shoot the gap. And it, like the days, it's why it's so special when you get Darrelle Revis, like, which he is like in our generation's the greatest corner that we've ever got to see. It's just one of those ones that they don't coach it anymore. Like, that's the problem. Next game up, Sunday night, Cowboys-Steelers. You got the Cowboys who are reeling and the Steelers who just came off their first loss. Who you guys think?
I'll tell you what, it's going to be a tough game for Dallas to go in and try to beat the Steelers. The more and more that we're seeing it, and I know that we crapped on Fields quite a bit, but I think it's becoming apparent that Fields can play in this league. He's able, to have success in this league. Obviously, it wasn't with the Bears. They've got the offense rolling. They've got a solid defense. I think Dak is going to have to pull a rabbit out of his hat, because what we saw out of that offense just is not it's just not meshing. Like we all thought when they came out week 1 and blew the brakes off the Browns, we're like, hey, this Dallas team is great. And then they get absolutely boat raced by the Saints week 2. And now the Saints looking like the Aints, again here by week 5. Like, there's a lot of question marks that are lingering around. And the Cowboys barely beat the Giants. Like it was a 5.5 point spread and they didn't even cover. So there's huge question marks for this Dallas team. And, it goes back to that whole, hey, how soon is McCarthy going to be getting fired discussion if this trend continues for the rest of the season?
And it's not his fault. Like,
exactly.
Dallas is coming in there playing immediately to the Steelers' strengths, which is we don't have a rushing game, so we're going to throw. And on the opposite side, you got TJ Watt, who's like, cool, that's exactly what we're going to do best. Like, I'm going to sack Dak 5 times in this game. If McCarthy, you talked about it sort of when we were guessing hypotheticals of who's going to get fired first. Maul said this in the preseason. It was like, he was like Mike McCarthy, because it will be this scenario that it's like, oh, we'll fire him. He's the scapegoat. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, and then we'll bring in someone else. And that's what's supposed to make it better. It's like, no, it was Jerry Jones. Like the fact that you didn't go get anyone. The only person that you went out and got was a long snapper. You bring back Zeke, who's washed up. You don't have a rushing attack. Your defense is trash. Both Parsons doesn't look the same. Lawrence is out for multiple games. You really don't have a middle linebacker. Safeties are non-existent. Like, this is what you get, Cowboys fans. Like, you got it. And it's not McCarthy's fault.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me is Dallas's defense, dude. They can't stop anybody. And to be honest, as good as we thought their offense was, and they're still good. Like, I'm not taking anything away. Like, they can score points. But again, this is like the hindsight. Looking back, like, I feel like their offense is very similar to their offense last year. They had Tony Pollard, which sounds like a better name, but like Tony Pollard did nothing in the running game for them last year. Remember, everybody thought like, hey, Pollard was better than Zeke 2 years ago, so now he's finally the starter. And he's, again, one of those examples of like, he didn't do anything. Turns out maybe they just can't run the ball. They don't have a good run game in Dallas. They have to rely on throwing the ball. However, the big difference was last year, dude, the Dallas defense was solid. They were a really good defense. And that was helping them win games and make it look like their offense was maybe more explosive than they are. But I'd make the argument that their offense is almost exactly how it was last year. Their defense, for whatever reason, has significantly decreased. And that's all of a sudden exposing the Cowboys and like, oh, wow, they're not that good. And like you said, they're going to make Mike McCarthy the scapegoat when it's just like, dude, he's not doing anything on the sideline. He's not hurting them, but he's not like helping them, right? Like that team is exactly who Jerry Jones wants them to be.
Well, you know why their defense is terrible, don't you? I mean,
Dan Quinn left.
Yeah, Dan Quinn left. Like I said that in the preseason. Like I think we're going to see a regression out of Mike Zimmer, because he's been on his hunting lodge for the last 2 seasons, not doing anything, and now we're going to call him back up and see what's going on. I just looked it up. Dak is throwing for 40 plus times a game again, and like that just says all the answers right there. Dak is not a one-man band. I know he got the money, but he can't do it alone back there.
Final game Monday night: Saints Chiefs. Chiefs, in my opinion, talk about 4-0 teams, are really just a handful of plays from being 0-4.
It's the defense,
handful of
especially
flags.
Yeah, all the flags.
I've seen so many
The
memes
NFL's
about.
going to find me for that.
Oh yeah, you get murdered.
Cease and desist.
Yeah.
I think for me, the only thing outside of the generous officiating, if that's what we're going to call it, for me is the defense. You know, like there's nothing spectacular that's really happening with the offense right now, especially with Pacheco being hurt. You know, all the receivers are gone. You know, Rashee Rice doesn't get suspended by the NFL, but Mahomes still takes his knee out for the year. Like there's a lot of Hollywood being gone. Like there's just so many things that's wrong with this offense, you know, that we'll see if they fix or not.
Is that going to be like a moral, the ball, you know, the ball don't lie, you know, like a moral ball don't lie, meaning like he should have been suspended, but instead he's going to play a few games and then take out by his own player.
Dude, I find it so funny is that Von Miller's out for, you know, 4 games, but Rashee gets nothing. Like it crazy.
Oh no, he got his punishment for that hit and run. It just happened in the game. That was the funniest meme I saw was, oh, now you know what it's like to be on the receiving end of a hit and run. And I was like, God, that's savage.
Listen, like it's still the Chiefs, so like they should win the game. However, I'll just throw this scenario out. I would not be surprised to see the upset here. Primarily just because, again, we've talked about it in the NFL. It's just so hard to stay undefeated, right? Like it doesn't matter the team. At some point, they're probably going to lose, right? So every game that the Chiefs win, the probability of them losing the next one goes up, right? The Saints have proven that they can move the ball, right? So we'll say counteract the Chiefs' good defense with like the Saints could show up and have an amazing offensive game. The Saints defense is no slouch though. Like the Saints defense can hang, right? And the Chiefs are without now their number 1 wide receiver. They've been now without their number 1 running back, right? They're kind of starting to have to go to this running back by committee. They got Kareem Hunt, but he didn't look amazing. Carson Steele fumbles the ball. They don't have a great run game. And we've already talked about, even with Rashee Rice, like their offense has been kind of pedestrian anyway. So now that they don't have that option, like I could see this just being a game that it's hard for the Chiefs to kind of overcome all of that. The Saints defense is good enough to just stop Mahomes a few times. And then, you know, it could be like a close game that they end up pulling out in the end.
And I mean, without Kelsey putting up 100 yards per game, like, I mean, I understand like these seasons are going to happen, or these slow starts are going to happen every once in a while to these elite guys. But until they find a way to get him involved on that offense, I mean, Mahomes isn't going to have all day to let, you know, Xavier Worthy get 30 yards downfield before he just chucks up a prayer, you know, every single play. Like the Saints aren't going to let that happen. So I could see the Saints walking away. I mean, I'd have to sit back and chew on it, but I think I'd be leaning more towards the Saints based on what we've seen already out of offensive production.
The only 2 touchdowns that the Falcons scored were defensive last week.
Yeah.
A muff punt recovered for a touchdown and a pick 6. They held them to field goals. Like you guys are talking about, Kansas City's offense is really in disarray right now. They still have Mahomes. Kelsey hasn't looked the same in terms of production from the previous few years. Yeah, this very real possibility this is the Chiefs' first loss. Outside of that, that sort of wraps up the NFL for Week 5. You guys got anything else?
Caleb's throwing for 400 this week.
And I will clip that for next week.
Give me the under.
Right. I'm Pull Chalks. We'll see you guys next time.
Peace.